I really need to learn how to do live streams, so I have brought in an expert today to help me figure this out. I have lots of goals and dreams for this home studio of mine, and one of those is actually doing more live streaming and really bringing in guests, expert guests onto my channel. Well, today I have Parecki who is joining me to give me some insight into live streaming with his recommendations, as well as some pro tips, because he's been doing this for a lot longer than I have, given that I have never live streamed from my studio, so I don't even know where to start. These can be super handy tips for presenters, for virtual conference speakers as well, not just YouTubers. I'm so happy to have you on today, Aaron. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, I'm happy to be here.
So what got you interested in live streaming in the first place?
It's a really good question. I've been interested in videography and that kind of thing for a very long time. I did a lot of projects in high school and college, and in my more professional career, I started getting involved in filming conferences, and I started by going to local events and offering to film them, and then eventually charging them to film them and producing those online videos that you see after the conference. And that kind of rolled into what I'm doing now, which is a lot of live streaming. And especially since everything shut down in March, I've had to move a lot of my own professional speaking at conferences and events and private trainings that I did, had to move that online. And that meant very quickly getting up to speed with what it takes to have a studio at home where I can, turn on and get on the air and start talking to people. So I've had to learn this stuff quickly myself. So a lot of this I'm still, ramping up, and my studio is not perfect either by any means, but I have learned along the way, and I definitely have enjoyed it.
I think it's perfect timing having you on, especially this year, because so many of us are now basically being forced to do a lot more virtual events, virtual live streams, virtual seminars, virtual education. Even teachers are having to do this now. Would you recommend that most people get into live streaming like you did, where you were filming at conferences and stuff like that? Or is there a specific way that you recommend people get started with live streaming?
Yeah, I don't think there's any need to go and sort of be behind the camera and get used to things that way first. No reason not to just jump right in and try this that we're doing right here, right? The technology is all very accessible these days. It's a lot easier to get started now than it was even 5 years ago. And nothing like just jumping in and starting.
You're just going to force us into the deep end, aren't you?
Yeah, me and the rest of the world with this work from home new normal.
Do you have any recommendations for a camera, a microphone, or even lighting as well?
Yeah, so I'm not going to recommend a specific set of technology here, because it turns out that the technology is a lot less important than how you use it. And also these three things you mentioned, the camera, mic, and lighting, they're all important, but there is a ranking in terms of how important they are. If you sound bad, if you have bad audio on your streams, nobody is going to watch you regardless of what you look like. Regardless of how good your camera is or how well you're lit, if you don't sound good, people will tune out. And if they're forced to watch you because it's like something for work, they're just going to hate it.
They're going to fall asleep.
So best thing you can do, they're going to fall asleep. They're going to check Twitter, whatever it is. And best thing you can do first is to improve your audio quality. So then secondly to that is improving your lighting, because you can actually go a long way by having good lighting with a not so great camera. You can't go the other way around. The best camera in the world is going to just not look like anything if you're not lit. You're just going to still be a black void. So, but the next best thing you can do is improve your lighting. There's lots of different techniques for that, not all of which require buying gear.
And then third, of course, you have the camera, and that really comes down to budget specifications. Like, for example, you could easily use a webcam or even your iPhone or your Android phone to be able to do live streams, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The built-in camera on laptops, I usually actually don't recommend at all, because they're usually not good, like actively not good. So the next best thing you can do is use something else, anything else, literally. Like your phone is going to be much better than your laptop camera. And secondly to that would be like an external webcam that you can buy. This is where it starts getting into a bit of a rabbit hole, because you can spend literally as much money as you want on a camera. Like
so true.
Pick a number and you can figure out how to spend that on a camera. So the question is, how much are you willing to spend? And then what can you do with that? So before you go and blow your whole budget on a camera, first get better audio, get better lighting, and then spend the rest on a camera.
So my setup in my computer office, which is where I usually do guest streams for like my friend on Daily Tech News Show, which is a great show, highly recommend folks watch it, is I have a really nice microphone set up on a little arm that's mounted on my desk. And then instead of using a webcam, which for pomps and circumstances is pretty terrible, I instead use a Sony CyberShot camera, and I recently upgraded to a Sony ZV-1, which is the vlogger camera, and have that plugged into basically an HDMI input into my computer. So that works really great. And then of course I have like Elgato key lights for my lighting. Definitely spent a lot, but I'm getting this really, really nice view and very nice audio. But the hard part for me is when it comes down to encoding and actually getting the things onto the computer correctly and exported correctly, or however you have to do it to actually live stream. So I know that encoders are a thing that you need in order to live stream, and there are both software and hardware versions. So what is your preference and why?
Yeah, so this starts getting into some of the philosophy behind this. If you're doing anything beyond just joining video conferencing systems, where if you're like in Zoom or Google Meet, whatever, they handle all of that and you don't have to think about it. You get the best video.
And that's what I've been doing so far as a guest.
Yeah, exactly. And you just get the best video you can on your end, feed it into whatever platform you're using for video conferencing, and that's it. If you're talking about wanting to start doing actual live streams where you are then broadcasting to YouTube, for example, or other live streaming platforms, that's where you need some form of encoder. You need something to take that video, package up in a way that is accepted by these live streaming platforms, and deliver it over the internet. So there's generally two different families here, software or hardware. You'll hear this a lot, software encoders versus hardware encoders. The idea of a software encoder is that it's software that you run on your computer that then does that encoding. So you need a way to bring the video into your computer, which sounds like you already have with some sort of HDMI capture card. And then you need some software that will encode it for YouTube. There's a handful of different options, again, at many different price points. The free one is called OBS. It's a great tool. It does not cost anything, and it actually is quite powerful. You can also find more expensive ones like vMix, which is a more professional solution, or Ecamm Live or Mimo Live. There's a lot of different options. They all have different sets of features and different things they can do. Now, in a totally different family, you'll find hardware encoders. And that is where you're going to buy a separate physical device that will then do that encoding to YouTube. And these, again, take many different forms at many different price points, and you can spend as much as you want on them. The one that I am particularly fond of is the ATEM Mini Pro. This is what I use to run my streams. And this is what I run my weekly show on. I have this on my desk. My camera is plugged into it, actually more than one camera, which is one of the really cool things about it. And then it is able to accept multiple video feeds and then do the encoding up to YouTube. So I plug in a network jack into the back of it. It's hardwired in. It's got good internet on it, and then it's doing the streaming directly to YouTube.
But wait, I thought that in software, like in OBS or Wirecast, you can also have like multiple inputs. That's definitely a thing, correct? So if I needed to save the money, if I wanted something free, I could just go with like a software encoder, which can also work as a switcher?
Yeah, so there's some blurry lines here. You will actually rarely find a product that is doing just one of these roles of just the switcher or just the encoder. They're often bundled together. And yes, OBS is very flexible and very powerful, and it can do a lot of things, including switching between multiple cameras. The trade-off there is that it's all running through your computer, and you then need to have multiple video feeds going into your computer with then multiple capture cards if you're trying to get multiple cameras. And that starts to get to be a lot of work for the computer, and you need a pretty powerful computer to make that work well.
Oh, so you may still already be spending some money there as well.
Yeah, so even though the software is free, you're going to end up spending a lot more money on a computer to make that work, which is kind of where we get to my preference here, which is on the hardware encoder side. For some reason, I'm less willing to spend a lot of money on a computer than I am willing to spend money on extra hardware. I don't know what that is, probably because I like portable and small computers more than I like desktops. So I've always prioritized smallness and the form factor in laptops, which tend to be lower power machines, not really capable of doing a lot of work in OBS.
That's a good point. I didn't even think about that. The portability, the fact that you could take a ATEM Mini Pro as opposed to a giant desktop computer to a convention and do live streams, that could be extremely beneficial if I was to do interviews and want to live stream them from like DEF CON, for example.
Yeah, definitely. Like you can get pretty powerful laptops, but they're going to be really expensive or really loud because you have to pack them full of fans or just really big. Whereas if you start putting together little portable kits with some dedicated hardware, they can often be a lot smaller and be able to do more with a smaller package. So it's always these trade-offs, right? And I've just sort of skewed more towards I'm willing to put together a small kit, and because I really do want a small laptop. I don't want to carry 5 pounds of computers around all the time.
Well, you don't want to carry around 5 pounds on your back through like the CES halls.
Right.
I do that every year.
Yep. Someday when we can go back to CES again.
I know, I miss CES. Well, kind of. I don't like fully miss it, but I miss the social aspect of going to CES, not necessarily bringing home the con flu. So I've figured out based on your answers how I can actually get myself into a live stream and how I can switch cameras from like my desktop screen and share my screen over to the one that's showing me. Even I could do like a top-down camera. Ooh, that would be so cool. I could do live stream unboxings. So I guess the next part of this would be, how do you handle bringing in remote guests? Because that's a whole nother process right there.
There's a lot to it. It can be complicated. I will say the easiest possible way you can do a joint live stream with a remote guest is actually using StreamYard. And I've enjoyed using this a lot more than I thought I would.
Oh.
It is a entirely online switcher and encoder, effectively, where everybody joins from a browser and brings their own webcam or whatever is pretending to be a webcam, like the ATEM Mini can appear to be a webcam for the computer. And if everybody joins that link, then everybody shows up on the screen. And as the host, you get to control who's there and like whether you want them in a grid or side by side or whether screens are being shared. It's very powerful. It is also very limiting. So the options you get are very limited, which then also make it very easy to use. So I usually like to say this is a very good way for people who are just starting and also people who have zero experience in any video work. You can teach people how to do this in a way where they can run an event themselves with just a small amount of training. Like I've actually taught people how to use StreamYard in just like under an hour, and then they are able to go run a 8-hour long conference themselves with it, right?
Wow.
Like that's the kind of power it gives you. The trade-off is the flexibility, because obviously the more flexible the tool, the harder it is to use, right? So StreamYard, great option, great way to get going. You just send a link to a guest, they drop into the stream, and then StreamYard's the one doing the encoding up to YouTube or wherever you're streaming to.
Okay, so StreamYard exists, and that's definitely a great option when I'm just getting started, but what about when I want to take it a little bit more professional and make it look a little bit more high quality?
OBS is a pretty powerful tool that you can use in the mix here. There's many different ways to use OBS in this workflow, for example. One way is to use it with something like Zoom or Google Meet, for example, where you can effectively just sort of screen capture the window that you're talking with the other person on. Bring that into OBS and then do your layouts or whatever. There's, again, some limits with that and some caveats there. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it is free. There's another option. There's a tool for OBS made by somebody else called obs.ninja. That's actually a URL, thanks to the .ninja TLD. That tool effectively lets you bring in a remote webcam as a source in OBS. So it's like a sort of more professional version of screen capping a Hangout, a Google Hangout, or a Google Meet now, I guess they call it. That is free. That's great. There's, again, more professional or more expensive tools you can use for this as well. And that's going to be using things like Mimo Live, where you can actually have the option of bringing in a guest at a URL using some app they're running. Same with vMix. vMix has a tool for that as well. A lot of these tools are things that are actually used in very professional broadcast studios. So they are priced as such as well. And they will often charge you additional licenses based on the number of guests you're bringing in and things like that. Another option is actually using Skype. Skype has a special feature in the Skype for Creators app. It's a separate app you download called Skype for Creators. Skype for Creators will take your guest's camera and expose it on your network over a protocol called NDI. And you can then bring that NDI feed into a lot of different software switchers. So you can bring it into OBS or other software switchers that you're using, where you get a clean feed of your guest as if it were a video source that were local. So some pretty cool workflows you can do there. I know this is a lot of different options I'm throwing out at you because it turns out there's just a lot to it, and there's a lot of different ways to solve this problem.
Oh yeah. Well, I'm glad there's a lot of options, and that makes it very budget friendly if you need that. And for like big brands, there's also plenty of ways for them to do it as well. Even conferences, like it sounds like I have many, many options depending on where I choose to go with my channel and with my studio. So I'm happy to hear all this information.
Yeah, there's a lot of different options, which is both good and bad. It's good because you get to sort of explore, but it can be kind of overwhelming. I do think also that a lot of these different options, you will find your particular preference for some of them, and that may land more on the inexpensive software-based side because you have a good computer, you can take advantage of it. Or if you only have a portable, underpowered laptop, and you're not willing to upgrade to a $10,000 desktop or whatever, you may find yourself preferring other solutions instead. But it really is a lot of personal preference. There's no like right and wrong way to do it. And I've definitely found where I skew on that end of using hardware tools, trying to use special purpose devices that are dedicated to one task. That's actually one of the other things I should mention is I tend to not trust software as much, possibly because I've lived in the software world for a long time. I teach software developers about writing software as my day job. I know a little too much about how computers work to be willing to trust them. So yeah.
I get that.
So I tend to trust more the specialized hardware that is not general purpose computing, that has a particular task and that's all it's meant to do. And I will trust that to do its job better than I will trust a computer to pretend to be that. But again, it's all personal preference. I know people fall on different ends of that spectrum, and there is no right or wrong here.
Whenever I guest host on somebody else's channel, usually they will send me an email ahead of time to say like, hey, make sure you're using headphones as opposed to speakers to make sure there's no audio feedback when they are recording. And they basically lay out like the best way to get the best quality from the people that are coming on for guest interviews or just interviews in general. So I wanted to know what you think are the best ways to ensure audio quality as well as video quality from the people that you are bringing on as guests to your channel.
So the best thing you can do for your remote guests is to improve their audio. And the best way to do that is to, first of all, make sure they're wearing headphones, because even though a laptop can do pretty good noise cancellation through software like Google Meet and Zoom, it takes active work for the computer to do that, and you are losing something somewhere along the way. So if it doesn't have to do that work, that's better. So wear headphones. That's why I'm wearing headphones right now, right? I'm not hearing you through my laptop. And secondly, get the person to use any sort of microphone that is something better than their laptop microphone. And that can be headset microphones are fine. The other option is dedicated microphones, like an external microphone that you run into a camera or into the computer, like a USB microphone. If you don't want it in the frame, like I tend to not like the giant microphone in the frame look. That's just me. I know there's plenty of reasons why it's a good look for some channels. If you don't want the microphone in the frame, the best way to do it is to put the microphone just out of the frame, like up on top. That's where my microphone is that you're hearing me from right now. It's actually right up here. My finger's about an inch away from it right now. And that's what you're hearing me through. And what that does is it puts it extremely close to my face. And that's the trick here. You want to get the microphone as close to the person as possible, because that way it picks up more of their voice and less of the rest of the noise in the space. So the closer the microphone, the better. That's why, again, headset mics are a good option for that.
It's the exact same reason why I wear a lavalier whenever I'm doing my recorded videos like this right now, is because it's as close to my face as possible and it's giving me the clearest audio that I can from a separate Zoom recorder. So it does make for more editing, but it does sound great. Now, of course, when I'm live streaming, I prefer to use a boom mic, like a separate microphone completely, and just use that on a little arm and push it in front of my face. But like you mentioned, you can totally see it in the screen when I do that. I don't personally mind, but it can be kind of annoying to have that thing right in front of you whenever you are trying to record.
And for like live streaming, it often makes sense that it's in the shot because it's sort of part of the experience of you're watching someone live streaming, and that's fine. If you're doing like a conference talk, I think it looks less professional to have the microphone in the shot where you're trying to talk about some other concept, right? So again, it's personal preference.
Well, I feel like we covered everything, but is there anything else that we should probably cover to make sure that I'm good to go when I build out my live streaming setup?
I guess the other thing I would say is just practice, because no matter how much you think and you try to prepare for it and do all the research, it's nothing like actually doing it. And this is true, in everything. But this is how I also was getting into filming conferences, where I would start by just trying something, and then I would figure out this thing didn't work and then try something different and just keep iterating on it. And as I'm doing my live streams now and all my workshops remotely, I'm continually swapping out gear. It doesn't stay the same for very long. I'm always trying to improve the next thing. This is actually the first time I'm shooting in this configuration in my space. I just reconfigured everything yesterday in preparation for this because I was like not quite happy with the previous look. So this is...
Well, I think it looks great.
Well, thanks. Yeah, this is not something that I had to spend any money on. I just literally moved things in the space, right? I have that shelf back there, which was on a different wall, and I have my desk now, which was in a different spot. So now I've got it in this configuration, and I'm pretty happy with it for now. We'll see if I continue to be happy with it. But practice, just keep doing it, and you'll get the feedback when you watch yourself back and look at how it went. You'll say, oh, I don't like that thing over there in the shot. I should move that, or I think my audio would sound better if I could do this, this change here, and then you'll get better and better.
Oh yeah, I'm always experimenting. In fact, that's how I know that I see reflections in my glasses when I have my lights in specific areas, but I'm always learning and always educating myself. So I really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you so much. This has been like mind-blowing for me, and I have learned so much from you. So where can people learn more? Because you have a ton of tutorials that people can watch, correct?
Yeah, take a look at my channel, my YouTube channel. It's just my name, Aaron Parecki, or youtube.com/AaronPK. And I do weekly live streams talking about live streaming technique and live streaming gear. I talk a lot about the A10 Mini line of products, also other live streaming products, and it's a lot of fun. I also do some tutorial videos about those things as well, talking about usually live streaming gear, sometimes lighting or sound or other tools for remote collaboration. So take a look at that channel, a lot of resources there, and I am super enjoying creating that kind of content. So it's been a lot of fun.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining me today. Hey, if you are new here, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to see more tips from me about security and privacy online, check out the video I did with Aaron over on his channel, and make sure to subscribe over there as well. Comment below with any questions you have for Aaron. And thank you again so much to my s'mores for watching. I'm Shannon Morse, and I will see you soon. Bye, y'all.